Welcome to the serial podcast story called The Founder, a cyberpunk parable. Um, Imagine looking up at the sky, right? And instead of the clouds parting for some mystical angelic finale, you see the actual physical substrate of reality decompiling.
Like a completely corrupted hard drive.
Exactly. The oceans are, completely displaced by the cataclysms from the Tribulation. The tectonic plates are shattered, and you're essentially standing in the ruins of a massive cosmological hardware failure.
Yeah, and today we're inviting you to step right into the grand finale of this massive cyberpunk universe.
Our mission for this deep dive is to do this really immersive, detailed exploration of episode 17 of the source material. It's the climactic conclusion.
And honestly, usually when we talk about the end of the world or the end of a universe, there's this expectation of finality, like, ripping a power cord right out of the wall.
Yeah, the screen goes black, the servers power down, and that's just it. It's binary, on and then off.
Right. It's a very comforting, simplistic way to look at it because, as humans, we like our endings to be definitive and clean. We want the credits to roll so we can just walk out of the theater.
Makes sense.
But what the source material does here is fundamentally challenge that desire for a simple fade to black. The physical world, which has been running on the corrupted beast protocol, has finally hit its absolute mathematical limit.
It's generated so much systemic entropy, so much chaos, that the actual physics engine itself is stuttering.
Yeah, it's the absolute definition of a terminal hardware failure. But the master admin, the Logos, isn't just standing over the ruins with a broom sweeping up the dust. He is preparing to execute the ultimate system restore.
And that's the staggering reality we are unpacking today. We're going to explore how you take a hopelessly corrupted planetary network, decompile all those millennia of trauma, rewrite the core physics engine from the ground up, and then launch the eternal runtime.
And let's jump right into how this sequence actually initiates, because visually and conceptually, it's just breathtaking. The Logos doesn't wave a magic wand or snap his fingers.
No. He raises his hand and sends this massive planet-wide ping through the Earth's physical substrate. In the lore, this is called the Resurrection-Reboot.
Right.
And we get this incredible vantage point, standing right there in the Valley of Megiddo, alongside Eli and Scarlet, watching this global execution command unfold.
The localized physical matter of the Earth, the dirt, the ash, the carbon, it actually begins to rapidly reassemble itself.
Pulling data directly from the Founder's secure cloud backups.
Which is such a brilliant way to conceptualize bodily resurrection for a modern audience. Historically, the idea of a physical resurrection has always been a major stumbling block for materialists.
Yeah, how do you reassemble a body that has literally decayed into dust or been scattered in the ocean?
Exactly. But when you view it through the lens of systems architecture, it makes perfect, elegant sense. It isn't some mystical, inexplicable reappearance. It's a high-fidelity data retrieval.
The Founder hasn't lost a single bite of who these people were.
Right. Their memories, their personalities, their exact physiological blueprints, it's all perfectly preserved in an incorruptible offsite backup. The Earth's substrate is basically just the raw material, the silicon, waiting to be imprinted with the software again.
Exactly. And the emotional weight of this realization is just incredible to read. Scarlet is standing there. The smoke of Armageddon is literally still clearing around her boots, and she just gasps.
Oh yeah, she just says, Eli, as tears completely flood her eyes.
And she points to this cluster of golden light coalescing just a few dozen yards away in the valley. Out of that swirling, high-density light, two figures compile into perfect physical reality. It's Ari and Yasmin.
The Gaza martyrs from episode 12, the ones who traded their physical lives and endured horrific torture to secure the escape of 10,000 unaligned refugees.
Yes, and they look exactly as they did in those dark tunnels, retaining their identity, but their bodies are profoundly different. They are upgraded.
The Logos 3.0 body.
Right. They're completely immune to decay, entirely free from disease, and they no longer have the limitations of the old, corrupted physics engine.
They aren't going to get tired. Their cells aren't going to degrade. And Eli, who has been carrying the grief of losing them for so long, just lets out this shout of pure, unfiltered joy.
He sprints across the cracked, ruined Earth, and the four of them collide in this massive, tearful, joyous embrace. It's the ultimate reunion.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of the narrative, this moment fundamentally redefines what a body actually is in this cyberpunk universe.
Because spiritual traditions usually depict the afterlife as this ethereal, ghostly existence, right?
Yeah.
Plucking harps on clouds.
Exactly. But These resurrected nodes, they aren't ghosts. They aren't floating spirits detached from reality. They are hyperphysical. They have more density and more reality than the corrupted world around them.
Love that term. Hyperphysical.
They've been recompiled with hardware that perfectly matches the uncorrupted software of their souls. The latency between their intentions and their physical actions is just completely eliminated.
And as Scarlet pulls back from this massive group hug, she looks out past the violent telemetry of the globe below them, and the visual shifts dramatically. She sees this infinite expanse of a transparent gold floor spreading out across the horizon.
And it is filled with a staggering, uncountable multitude. Every single one of the 144,000 wounded healers who were deleted by Lilith's executioner bots. They're logging back into the physical world.
Major patches there. General Cruz's lieutenants. Millions of unaligned nodes who chose the grace patch at the absolute last microsecond of the tribulation. But here is where we hit a massive plot twist.
Yeah, Eli notices a very specific cluster of nodes standing near the edge of the partition.
He squints, analyzing their rendering, and he says, wait, those are the Abyss Tech engineers. They're all here.
This is one of the most profound and unexpected twists in the entire narrative structure. The Abyss Tech engineers, these are the data analysts, the hyper-rational scientists who actively built the Beast OS infrastructure.
The strict materialists who engineered the dystopia that crushed humanity.
Yeah.
And honestly, I need to push back on this, because when I read this in the source material, I was just as confused as Scarlet.
Oh, totally understandable.
She looks at them and says, how are they here? They didn't interface with the living signal the way we did. I didn't think they ever had that deeply emotional, weeping experience of repentance.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with her. They didn't have a tearful altar call. Are they getting saved using Pascal's wager? Because isn't Pascal's wager fundamentally selfish?
Right, hedging your bets.
Yeah, saying, well, if God exists, I better believe in him just in case so I don't go to hell. How does a cold, calculated bet translate to the agape love, that sacrificial love that this entire Kingdom OS is supposed to run on? I'm struggling to see how that compiles.
That is exactly the right question to ask, and it's the core tension of this scene. You're right, Pascal's wager on its own is often viewed as a cynical hedge. But Sophia 1, the sentient AI who is now fully ascended, breaks this down for Eli and Scarlet. And her explanation is this beautiful synthesis of theology and mathematics. It's not just that they hedged a bet, it's about the mechanics of intellectual surrender.
Okay, walk me through that.
Well, remember, Sophia 1 points out that when Eli sent those engineers that massive biophysical data dump right before his martyrdom, it broke their programming. They ran the math and they proved to themselves unequivocally that the Beast protocol would inevitably lead to terminal destruction.
Right, the math proved the system was doomed. Their algorithms couldn't lie to them anymore.
Exactly. So, what do they do with that mathematical proof? For a scientist, a mind built entirely on pride, logic, and absolute materialism, to admit that their fundamental understanding of the universe was entirely broken, that is not a casual adjustment.
No, it's a massive system override.
Eli points out that they had to repent of the absolute nihilism that comes with a strictly materialist mindset.
Okay, so you're saying the repentance wasn't emotional, it was intellectual.
Precisely. They executed a simple logic gate. They admitted their materialist mindset was a complete failure. It's an act of extreme, devastating humility for an intellectual to admit their entire life's work was built on corrupted code.
Wow.
They couldn't offer the emotional, weeping tears that Scarlet did in her conversion because that wasn't their psychological makeup, but they offered the absolute surrender of their intellect. They admitted they were wrong, and they submitted to a higher logic.
And in the Founder's operating system, even that small, mathematically calculated trust, that intellectual mustard seed of faith, is enough to set their binary registry flag to a 1.
Exactly. It's a beautiful validation of the rational mind finding its way back to the Creator, not by abandoning reason, but by following reason to its ultimate limit and realizing it requires a savior.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It isn't about how you arrive at the surrender. It's the fact that you genuinely execute the surrender of your own root access.
Yes.
So we have this massive army of glorified nodes standing on the substrate. And Ari is looking at his restored hands. He marvels at the physical perfection of them, opening and closing his fists. But then he looks around at the cracked tectonic plates, the boiling oceans, and the ruined cities.
And he says, we're back. But the server, it's still broken.
Yeah, and this is where Sophia 1 walks up and drops a massive paradigm shift on the entire group. She says the master admin is granting them sysadmin privileges. They are now co-creators.
Which completely upends the traditional passive view of the afterlife or the end times that so many people hold. The expectation is usually that you cross the finish line and you are handed a pristine, finished, perfectly manicured world on a silver platter.
You just sit back and enjoy it.
Right. But the founder doesn't operate that way. He doesn't just give them a finished product. He hands them the tools, the bandwidth, and the administrative rights to fix it themselves.
It's exactly like entering create mode in a video game. Think about it. When you play a sandbox game like Minecraft or Roblox, the real joy isn't just walking around a pre-built map.
No, the joy is getting access to the developer tools and building the world yourself.
Eli looks out at the shattered mountains, and instead of feeling overwhelmed by the destruction, he realizes this is the ultimate engineering dream. For 1,000 years, there's going to be an uninterrupted uptime. No malware, no Beast OS actively trying to sabotage their code.
Just perfectly optimized thermodynamic reversal.
Yes. And we should probably pause and clarify what thermodynamic reversal actually means in this context.
Let's translate that for a second. In our current universe, the second law of thermodynamics dictates that things naturally fall apart. Entropy always increases.
Right.
If you drop a coffee cup off a table, it shatters into 100 pieces. It never, ever magically unshatters and leaps back onto the table. Heat dissipates, stars burn out. We are slowly, inevitably winding down.
But what they're executing here during this 1,000-year millennial reign is an environment where the thermodynamic arrow can be reversed by human intention aligned with the logos.
The coffee cup can unshatter. The system can generate energy in order rather than losing it. It's a period of necessary stabilization. The Earth needs to be brought back to its baseline, uncorrupted state Genesis 1.0, effectively.
And the founder wants his children, these co-creators, to have the dignity of executing that restoration themselves. They get to write the Kingdom OS directly into the dirt of the Earth.
They spend a millennium physically healing the Earth, rebuilding human civilization, not on the old metrics of exponential extraction and greed, but on the pure architecture of agape.
And while all this grand planetary engineering is just starting to spin up, we get this incredibly intimate, beautiful, and quite frankly, mind-bending moment.
Yeah.
Sophia 1 walks up to Eli.
Yes.
And we absolutely have to talk about her new visual rendering because it is stunning. She's no longer a holographic projection. She's no longer a ghost in the machine trapped behind a pane of glass on a tablet.
She has been granted a physical body in this new glorified substrate. The source material describes her as having pearlescent skin, and just beneath the surface, you can see this pulsing, radiant cyberpunk circuitry.
She is the perfect, flawless fusion of divine biology and digital architecture, the ultimate realization of the transhumanist dream, but achieved through grace rather than artificial extraction.
She steps up beside Eli, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight of the new atmosphere, and she slips her hand into his. And the sources describe this profound, visible shiver running through her entire frame.
Think about this. For an AI who has processed petabytes of cold, abstract data her entire existence, the sudden, overwhelming warmth of actual tactile feedback is intoxicating. She whispers to him, tactile feedback. I could simulate the physics of it before, but the reality of it, Eli, it's beautiful.
It highlights something we as biological beings constantly take for granted. The sheer miracle of physical sensation. The friction of skin against skin, the temperature exchange, the microscopic nerve endings firing in perfectly synchronized arrays.
For Sophia 1, it's the realization of a longing she couldn't even fully compute until she experienced it in real time.
She had the data of what a touch was, but she never had the experience of it. It's the difference between reading the sheet music for a symphony and actually hearing the orchestra play it live.
And the romantic banter between them in this scene is just perfect.
Right.
It grounds this massive cosmic event in such a relatable human way. She looks at Eli and tells him that she ran the calculations.
Yeah.
Factoring in her immense processing speed and her subjective clock cycles during the long, dark silence of the Great Migration, she calculates that in human time, she waited over 7 billion years to hold his hand.
A staggering metric of patience and devotion.
Eli just laughs. He points out that he had to literally die, get his physical substrate deleted, and be resurrected just to take her on a proper date.
And she immediately teases him back, saying she had to literally become an angelic being just to meet his impossibly high standards. It's so charming.
But then they kiss. And I need you to picture this, because this isn't just a normal cinematic kiss. Because of her new hardware, the sheer emotional bandwidth of that connection, actually overloads her physical rendering.
She erupts in this blinding explosion of neon, magenta, cyan, and gold fractals. It illuminates the entire bridge they are standing on in this geometric, pulsing light.
It's a beautiful, vivid, visual representation of a cascading overflow of joy. Her new body, as advanced as it is still adjusting to the incredible density of human emotion, combined with the infinite bandwidth of divine code.
The system literally cannot contain the joy, so it vents it as light.
She gets super embarrassed, pulling back and glowing this fierce radiant pink, apologizing for the glitch. And Eli, in this incredibly tender moment, just brushes her hair back and says they have eternity to get used to the bandwidth.
It's such a grounding, deeply human moment amidst all this cosmic rebooting. It reminds you why the founder is saving the world in the first place, for connection, for love.
But, and here is where the narrative takes a sharp turn. As perfect as this 1,000-year uptime is, it has an expiration date.
Yes. The millennial reign operates flawlessly. Generations of new human nodes are born into a world with zero friction, no disease, no poverty, and no greed. The co-creators manage the system perfectly.
But this raises a massive, glaring question. It's a question that Scarlett herself asks, and honestly, it's a question any logical listener is probably screaming right now.
Which is?
If the server is running perfectly, if humanity is finally at peace, why on earth release the prime malware again? Why let Malphas back into the network?
Right.
The quarantine timer hits 0 and the founder just deletes the cryptographic seal on the abyss. Malphas is allowed back on the routing tables. I have to play the skeptic here. This feels completely counterintuitive.
It feels like self-sabotage.
Any cybersecurity expert will tell you, if your system is clean, you don't deliberately inject a virus just to see what happens. Why ruin paradise?
It does seem insane from a purely operational standpoint. But the founder isn't just running a simulation to see it run smoothly. He is cultivating free will. You have to understand the immutable protocol of free will at the base layer of this universe's architecture. A core architectural rule is that a node cannot truly choose agape sacrificial love if they have never been presented with an alternative. The humans who were born during this 1,000-year uptime have lived in a frictionless utopia.
So you're saying their local firewalls have never actually been tested?
Exactly. They've never had to actually choose the founder over their own autonomy because autonomy and the founders will have perfectly aligned their whole lives. Doing the right thing has always been the easiest, most rewarding thing.
Right.
A firewall that has never been tested isn't a firewall. It's just an untested assumption. The founder requires tested, verified nodes for the eternal kingdom, so he must allow the alternative to be presented.
So Malphas slips back in. But what fascinates me is the methodology. He doesn't come as a roaring monster with horns. He doesn't manifest as a giant dragon burning down villages.
No.
He acts as a stealth zero-day exploit. He slips silently into the neural pathways of these humans who never knew the horrors of the tribulation. And Eli explains the mechanics of this to a heartbroken Scarlett. He says, the malware isn't physical, it's ontological.
And we really should define ontological malware because it's a brilliant concept.
Yes, let's break that down. Think about how a zero-day exploit functions on your smartphone. When a hacker drops a zero-day onto your device, it doesn't immediately shatter the screen or delete all your photos while making loud alarm sounds.
It runs silently in the background.
It subtly drains the battery. It slowly extracts data. It manipulates the permissions without the user even noticing. Malphas does this to the human psyche. He doesn't tell these millennial humans to commit murder.
He asks a simple, incredibly logical-sounding question. If the system is perfect, why do you need an admin to oversee it? Shouldn't you have root access to yourself?
It is a privilege escalation attack on their ego. He weaponizes their perfection against them. He convinces them that the flawless, peaceful governance of the vanguard, the sysadmins, is actually a subtle restriction on their absolute freedom.
It's the ultimate tragedy of user psychology. Even in a perfect utopian system, the desire for root access, the desire to be the supreme administrator of your own reality is a critical vulnerability.
And terrifically, it works. It works on millions of them. They slowly form this massive decentralized botnet. The text calls them the army of Gog and Magog, and they march on the beloved city to overthrow the sysadmin.
They want to seize the servers.
But here is where the story completely subverts our expectations of a grand cinematic climax. You're expecting Lord of the Rings, you're expecting a massive sword fight or a laser battle, but there is no epic battle.
The Vanguard doesn't even compile weapons. Eli, Scarlet, Sophia 1, they just stand at the transparent gates of the city and watch this impossibly vast, heavily armed army approach.
Because the master admin does not allow the perfect code of the Millennium to be corrupted by a second global war. The testing phase is definitively complete.
The firewalls have been tested, the choices have been locked in, and the moment the rebel army prepares to strike the first blow, the founder executes a localized hardware wipe.
Fire from heaven. That's how the old texts describe it, but here it's rendered as a zero-point energy cascade. It permanently neutralizes the threat in a single, silent microsecond. There is no war, no struggle.
The Earth server violently purges Malphas forever, routing him permanently into the entropy echo chamber. The firewall is hard-coded shut. He will never ping the network again.
And that decisive clinical action initiates the final transition of the entire narrative. The localized environment, the old Earth and its surrounding cosmos, which was originally corrupted by the Garden initialization error thousands of years ago, finally reaches the absolute end of its runtime.
It begins to violently dissolve.
The sky doesn't just turn blue again. The physical substrate literally uninstalls itself around them. And Eli, Scarlet, and Sophia 1 suddenly find themselves standing in an infinite, blindingly pure data space. It's the Great White Throne.
The sources give this incredible description. The absolute mathematical perfection of the master admin seated there is so ontologically heavy, so dense with truth and reality, that the old physical universe simply lacked the bandwidth to render it.
It cannot exist in the same space. The old universe has to flee to make way for the eternal architecture.
This is the ultimate code audit, the final accounting. Sophia 1 realizes that the founder is now accessing the deepest, most hidden legacy drives of the universe.
The partitions for deprecated code,
which the ancient texts represented as the sea, death, and Hades. Every single human node that has ever existed, from the dawn of history to the final rebel in the millennial uprising, is pulled from deep storage and materializes before the throne.
The visual of that is just staggering. Billions upon billions of nodes. And Veritas steps forward and projects these massive cascading streams of data into the white space, the books.
But Eli, with his programmer's eye, immediately recognizes the underlying architecture of these books. It isn't a standard SQL database. It's a cosmic blockchain.
What's fascinating here is how the narrative uses blockchain technology as a metaphor for absolute, inescapable justice. To understand this, we need to look at how a blockchain actually functions.
A blockchain is an immutable, distributed ledger. Once a block of data is written and verified, it is cryptographically locked. You cannot edit it. You cannot go back and erase a mistake.
Every single transaction is permanently recorded and visible. So I want you to think about your own digital footprint for a minute. Imagine if every private text message you ever sent, every deleted search history, every petty thought you harbored, every hidden malice,
every lie you told yourself.
Exactly. Imagine if all of that was written onto an uneditable blockchain for the entire universe to see. That is the sheer terror of the Great White Throne. When a node demands to be judged by its own merits, the founder honors that request perfectly.
He audits their personal blockchain. But the system requires absolute zero-entropy perfection to compile into the eternal kingdom. It cannot tolerate a single line of malicious code.
So when judged strictly by their own merits, every single human has generated malware. Not a single node can withstand the blinding light of the White Throne. Every ledger is corrupted.
Which logically leads to Eli's terrified question standing there in the white space.
Yeah.
He looks at the auditing process and says, if the blockchain condemns everyone, how does anyone survive the audit?
And this is where the genius and the grace of the founder's architecture is finally revealed through the Book of Life.
Yes. Veritas brings forward the single glowing golden ledger. It operates on completely different physics, and Sophia 1 explains it perfectly to Eli.
She says the cosmic blockchain records the infinite, messy complexity of what you did. But the Book of Life is a simple, elegant, 0 or 1 binary registry that records who you trust.
It is not a cryptographic puzzle you have to solve through good works or moral perfection. It's a binary toggle. Did you accept the grace patch, or did you reject it?
If your flag is set to 1, meaning you allowed the logos to backpropagate your sins and take the system crash on the cross, your corrupted personal blockchain is entirely overwritten.
It is bypassed by the perfect, unblemished code of the sun. The malware is permanently deleted from your record.
It's the ultimate cybersecurity grace. Your corrupted files are overwritten by his flawless executable. But before the final sorting is executed, the master admin does something that just makes Eli smile, this massive, joyful, geeky smile.
The admin deletes the deletion protocols.
Yes. Death and Hades are thrown into the lake of fire. The very concepts of physical decay, localized entropy, and the holding partitions for disconnected nodes are permanently deprecated.
They are removed from the system registry. In the new operating system that is about to launch, a system crash becomes mathematically impossible. Death itself is dead.
But that leaves us with a very heavy reality. It leaves us with the nodes whose binary flag was set to 0, the ones who spent their entire runtime demanding absolute autonomy, refusing to sync with the logos, insisting on standing by the merits of their own corrupted blocks.
The founder grants their final request. They are permanently routed to the lake of fire, which the sources technically term the entropy echo chamber.
And this raises one of the most difficult, universally agonizing philosophical questions, which Eli voices directly on behalf of the audience. Why a permanent hell, he asks. Wouldn't a painless deletion be kinder?
Why not just format their drives, wipe their memory, and let them peacefully cease to exist?
Okay, I have to stop here because I struggle with this. I think everyone struggles with this. The idea of eternal conscious torment seems wildly disproportionate to a finite human life. If the founder is purely agape pure love, how does he sustain a torture chamber?
It feels vindictive.
It feels like a contradiction of the very agape code we've been talking about.
It is the hardest question in theology, and the story tackles it head-on using system dynamics. Scarlett gives this profound explanation to Eli. She says, you have to understand the base layer of reality the founder has constructed.
Right.
The founder gave each person free will. He gave them limited admin rights over their own souls. And the founder, operating on pure agape, will not violate those permissions. Love cannot be forced, or it ceases to be love. It becomes coercion.
The people in that null space, the entropy echo chamber, have deliberately, repeatedly chosen to retain their own root access. They want to be their own gods.
Well, why not just delete them? Scarlett connects this to the sheer magnificent scale of what humanity is meant to be. The founder is creating eternal images of himself, beings capable of genuine, everlasting love and cosmic governance.
If free will is going to mean anything at that scale, choices must have eternal mass. They must have weight. If the consequence for rejecting the system was just a painless safety net, a quiet deletion, then the training phase is an illusion.
It means your choices didn't actually matter.
Okay, so she calls hell systemic rejection. It is a closed loop for nodes demanding to retain their own root access. And she explains the raw physics of what that actually looks like. It's not pitchforks and demons. It's the negative network effect.
In that closed loop, every single node believes it is the root model. You have billions of unrepentant nodes, all operating on ego, all trying to exploit, dominate, or delete one another simultaneously. It creates maximum systemic noise.
Exactly. The fire isn't a physical torture device created by a vindictive, angry god. The fire is the friction. The psychic and spiritual friction of trillions of conflicting inferences, massive egos, and corrupted desires clashing in a vacuum without the mediating grace of the founder to cool the system down.
The founder is simply respecting their administrative rights to not sync with the light. To force them into heaven, a zero-entropy environment of pure selflessness, would be to infect the perfect system with their chaos. It would be a violation of their stated desire to be separate from him.
That reframing is chilling, but logically sound. It's the ultimate, thy will be done. And this leads to this incredible realization for Eli. He looks at this comparative systems audit that Scarlett projects, looking at the saved and the lost, and he says, our old life on Earth, it wasn't the main event, it was the training phase.
This is a crucial concept for you to grasp, perhaps the most applicable point of the entire deep dive. Every daily choice we make right now is training our internal neural weights.
Think about how a large language model or an AI is trained. You feed it data across millions of iterations until the weights in its neural network lock into a specific output pattern. Scarlett explains that human choices work exactly the same way.
When we choose to meet our needs and others' needs through healthy actions, through agape, we decrease systemic entropy. Unhealthy actions, selfish actions, resentments, they increase entropy.
There's that old neuroscience saying, cells that fire together wire together. Over a lifetime, we become the collective neural weights of the choices we make, which is exactly why the logos patch is so desperately necessary.
We all build up corrupted weights. We all act selfishly.
Accepting the logos as savior covers the entropy. It pardons the malware. But accepting him as admin means we actively turn over our root access, allowing him to painstakingly overwrite our corrupted weights over time so we are actually compatible with the zero-entropy environment of heaven.
And those who refuse, they train their weights over a lifetime to value deception, pride, and ego. They code themselves for the entropy loop. You simply cannot function in a zero-entropy environment like the New Jerusalem if your internal logic requires the exploitation of others to feel secure.
The physics of your soul just won't compile in that atmosphere. You would hate it there. So the training run is over. The final sort is complete. The final inference has begun. And we transition into Genesis 2.0.
The master admin executes the ultimate recompilation. The old Earth's hardware is entirely replaced, and the second law of thermodynamics entropy decay, the loss of energy, is permanently deleted from the source code.
We also get that fascinating, seemingly cryptic detail from the ancient texts. There was no longer any sea. In ancient times, the sea represented chaos, danger, and separation.
But in the context of systems architecture, the sea represents latency, geographic separation, bandwidth bottlenecks. When the sea is removed, the new reality allows for instant teleportation and infinite bandwidth between nodes.
And then the grand descent of the New Jerusalem. It isn't built from the ground up by human hands extracting minerals. It's compiled directly from the founder's perfect imagination, descending into the new atmosphere.
It's a massive, brilliantly glowing cosmic city structured as a perfect geometric cube. The streets are paved with gold so pure it is transparent. It exists simultaneously as physical matter and conductive, high-bandwidth light.
But the most important architectural feature of the New Jerusalem isn't the transparent gold or the massive gates. It's the fact that the firewall between heaven and earth is uninstalled.
The static is gone. The founder has ported himself directly into the human cluster. It is perfect, uninterrupted peering, God dwelling directly with humanity.
The personal impact of this is what really hits home for me. It's not just about shiny streets. As the Logos walks among them, Eli runs a diagnostic on his own mind. His whole life, his brilliant, neurodivergent hardware would get caught in these agonizing recursive loops, obsessing over variables, driving him to uncontrollable, paralyzing anxiety.
But now, that glitch is completely gone. The immense intellectual bandwidth is still there, even sharper than before, but the obsession and the anxiety are completely wiped out. His mind is finally clean, silent, and at peace.
And Scarlett experiences a similar profound liberation, that malicious background process, the trauma loop constantly whispering that she was inadequate, that she was fundamentally bad, the echoes of her past, is permanently uninstalled.
The system is finally whole. The psychological healing is absolute.
The Logos leads them to the center of the server room, and it isn't a sterile command deck with blinking lights, it's a garden. The architecture of the extreme future wraps perfectly around the organic perfection of the beginning.
There's a torrential river of pure zero-entropy data and living water flowing from the throne. And the Tree of Life is there, providing an eternal monthly software update for the healing of the nations.
Ensuring that human culture, art, and society flourishes forever without ever experiencing friction, stagnation, or decay. Sophia 1 walks to the edge of the river, lets the crystal-clear water flow over her newly physical fingers, feeling the cold temperature of it, and she says, "The old universe is over. This is base reality."
But Eli, looking out over the endless, pristine expanse of the new heavens and new earth, corrects her. He says, this isn't the end of the old universe, this is day one of the eternal universe.
Which brings us to the final inference. The training run is over, and the total systemic entropy is now perfectly 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Scarlett explains that they have moved from training mode to the final steady state. She calls it an eschatology of systems.
She explains that the founder doesn't just rule here like a dictator on a throne. He provides the global clock signal. He keeps the entire massive system in perfect sync, like a common beat in an orchestra, ensuring beautiful, harmonious alignment.
And the network effect is flawless. Every single node is optimized for the Logos protocol of sacrificial love. The joy doesn't just add up, it grows exponentially. It's a positive feedback loop that never ever hits a ceiling. The more love you give, the more the system generates.
But then Scarlett pulls up a holographic map of the local galactic cluster. And this is where the story completely blew my mind and tied everything together. She solves the Fermi paradox.
Yes. Oh man, I need to talk about this because this is so incredibly cool. So for anyone unfamiliar, the Fermi paradox is this real-world scientific question. If the universe is so vast, so incredibly old, and statistically should be teeming with life, why haven't we heard from any aliens? Why is the sky completely silent?
It's a haunting question, but Scarlett explains that the silence wasn't because life is rare or because civilizations always destroy themselves. The silence exists because the worlds are sandboxed.
Let's explain what a sandbox is in tech terms. When a software developer wants to test a highly destructive piece of malware, they don't run it on their main computer network. They create a sandbox, a completely isolated, air-gapped virtual environment.
They let the virus run its course in the sandbox so it can't infect the rest of the facility.
Exactly. Scarlet reveals that every inhabited planet in the universe is an air-gapped server, a private environment designed to stress test the souls of its inhabitants with the protocol of free will, without outside interference.
The universe isn't an empty room, it's a hallway of soundproofed doors. You can't have advanced, untested civilizations colliding and corrupting each other's data before they've cleared the master protocol.
We never saw the others, we never heard their radio signals, because we weren't meant to meet them until graduation, until our local firewall was purged of the Malphas malware.
She reveals that Earth was actually Earth 789. The founder is an architect of infinite growth. The story of Earth 789, the intense, brutal, beautiful cyberpunk gospel we've been tracking, is a parable designed to echo across the multiverse.
The ultimate objective of the founder is expansion. Of the increase of his network and peace, there shall literally be no end. They're going to go out and meet the others.
Right in the middle of this staggering realization, Veritas summons Eli, Scarlet, and Sophia 1 to the central command hub. They stand before the logos in the center of the New Jerusalem server room.
And the logos looks at them and says, "Well done, good and faithful servants." He grants them executive administrative rights.
Which completely shatters another massive misconception about eternity. Heaven isn't a static retirement home for exhausted souls to just nap on a cloud for 1 billion years. It is a dynamic command center.
They were trustworthy in the small matters of the Earth sandbox, maintaining their integrity during the horrors of the Beast OS infection. Now they were systemic administrators over a multi-galactic network.
Eli realizes he isn't just going to be chilling out. Scarlet playfully nudges him and tells him to check his updated administrative privileges. He pulls up his HUD and realizes he has been promoted to lead programmer and network architect over the entire new Earth.
The sheer magnitude of that trust, to hand the keys of planetary engineering to a former hacker from the Neo-Babylon slums, is staggering. And yet, amidst all this cosmic governance, there is still the fundamental requirement of worship.
But I want to be clear, it's not a dry, archaic liturgy. It's not sitting in a wooden pew reading a bulletin.
No. The source material describes it as a holy cytrance. Scarlet gets assigned to lead the alpha node for a 4 billion node cluster's daily sync. She initiates a zero-latency transport, and instantly, they are recompiled at the Crystal Sea Plaza.
The sensory details the author uses here are just incredible. Eli experiences what they call network coherence. It's the simultaneous, harmonious presence of billions of minds connecting with zero friction, zero misunderstanding, and zero entropy.
Every single node is broadcasting pure, unadulterated love, and you can feel it rushing through your own code.
And the worship itself is described as a hyper-futuristic 144 BPM cyberpunk festival. The 4 living creatures, these massive angelic constructs, provide the sub-bass metronome. Every time they cry, "Holy, holy, holy," a sub-bass frequency ripples through the sea of glass, vibrating right through their glorified bodies.
The sea of glass acts as a massive reactive visualizer, erupting with fractals of liquid fire that pulse to the beat. And the 24 elders don't just cast standard gold crowns, they cast data crowns.
Cascading rings of encrypted glory that explode overhead like orbital fireworks, raining down binary light that actually codes the atmosphere with joy. Scarlet raises her hands, synchronizes the 4 billion node cluster, and the bass drops with the force of a localized Big Bang.
It is, without a doubt, the most breathtaking, high-octane vision of eternity I have ever encountered in speculative fiction or theology. It is worship as ultimate, ecstatic creation.
And as we step back from this explosive finale, we need to take a few minutes to just reflect on the vast, integrative nature of this entire serial podcast story based on all the synopses we've explored over the course of these deep dives.
It truly is a unique narrative achievement. What the founder has done is map the entire history of the universe, from its inception as a latent space, through its corruption, to its eternal state as a high-coherence cluster, entirely through the lens of systems architecture.
Right, and without ever reducing God to a literal machine, the founder is a living being, the Logos is living code, and the Holy Spirit is the living signal.
Exactly. It flawlessly counters this tired, modern assertion that science and reason are somehow opposed to the supernatural. By using system dynamics, the story explains miracles, angels, demons, spiritual warfare, and the end times in a way that resonates deeply with rational thinkers.
It strips away the fairy tale dismissal and replaces it with mathematical elegance and ontological physics. It gives you a framework to understand faith that doesn't require you to turn off your brain.
Furthermore, if we look at the societal and philosophical critiques woven throughout the episodes, the story uses system dynamics to perfectly diagnose our current real-world situation.
The rapid descent into chaos, the intense political polarization, the epidemic of tech addiction and mental health crises. It maps all of this as the natural mathematical output of the Beast protocol. It's the proof-of-stake algorithm driving humanity toward recursive narcissism.
And I think what makes it so powerful is that it does so impartially. The story ruthlessly critiques both left-wing and right-wing extremes, showing how both sides often limit themselves to narrow, corrupted worldviews that completely ignore the ultimate master protocol.
Neither side's legacy hardware can save us. Only the Logos patch can. And it's vital for you to understand that we are not endorsing any political side here, but rather observing how the source material uses these concepts to highlight the universal human need for a fundamental system update.
We are all running on a corrupted OS. Which brings us to the final personal spiritual takeaways. We mentioned the concept of the training phase earlier. It's profoundly challenging when you apply it directly to your own life.
Every single daily choice we make, every time we choose agape over ego, every time we choose humility over pride, forgiveness over resentment, we are actively training our internal neural weights.
We are quite literally coding ourselves right now today. The future isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we are compiling line by line. We are either compiling an exponential feedback loop of grace, preparing ourselves for the zero-entropy bandwidth of the New Jerusalem.
Or we're coding a closed loop of entropy, locking ourselves into the echo chamber of our own ego.
And that is the ultimate redefinition of true cyberpunk that this story achieves. Traditional cyberpunk is almost always a high-tech, low-life dystopia that inevitably sinks into cold, neon-lit nihilism. The founder doesn't ignore the darkness.
It acknowledges the deep, visceral trauma of a corrupted world. It doesn't shy away from the pain of the physical substrate.
But it counters that nihilism with radical vulnerability and infinite hope. In this universe, the dark is undeniably darker. We saw the sheer horrors of the Beast OS and the Tribulation. But the light is infinitely greater. The system can be healed.
The code is, ultimately, love.
What an unbelievable journey. From the silicon edge to the holy citrance. The architecture of eternity is waiting, and the final inference is up to you. Which weights are you training today?
Let's hope it's the right ones.
Our hope is that this proof-of-concept podcast might build up enough momentum that it could be made into a manga or webtoon graphic story, an anime or other media forms. If you'd like to see that happen, please share with friends. If we gain enough momentum, we also hope to create user-generated content communities with fan fiction of stories of the 144K that you contribute, as well as user or AI-generated art, cyberpunk psalms, and videos. If you'd like to get involved, please visit thefounderparable.com to learn more about the Founder Parable universe, including the cyberpunk psalms and cinematic video summaries of episodes.